Blink and you'd miss it. A prison visitor hitches up her skirt and reaches for a packet of drugs. Her partner leans across and, using a tiny baby as a shield, grabs the contraband. For once, the operation is caught on camera. But to the dismay of the governor of Garth High Security Prison in the north of England, it's an all too familiar scene.
Here we've got young innocents, being used as donkeys, carriers to take in drugs. That behaviour beggars belief. It's despicable. I really could not give you the words that I'd like to use on this broadcast.
Another day, another transaction. As a distraction draws the prison officers away, the man on the left reaches between his legs and grabs a packet of heroin, passes it across the table, and the inmate stuffs it in his mouth. He necks the Class A drug, half swallowing it. Once the drugs are in prison, it's a race against time to find them before they're used. Scooby is Garth's secret weapon. The 4-year-old was recruited 3 years ago. He thinks he's playing a game. He's not.
What he's looking for is essentially his toy. His toy smells of the individual drugs, the heroin, cocaine, cannabis, whatever. And all the time that he's searching, he's actually searching for his toy. So when he finds cannabis or something like that, he reacts as if it was his toy. That person has got his toy, he wants to play, and that's the indication that you're looking for.
Scooby's strike rate is excellent, but then there's a lot for him to find. The British Home Office estimated that by the mid-1990s, half of all prisoners were on drugs. That figure has been falling thanks to mandatory drug testing, MDT. But according to one scientist, the policy of screening in office hours, Monday to Friday, is creating a far greater problem. A prison population binging on hard drugs at weekends in an effort to avoid detection.
The problem that we warned about was that because cannabis stays in the urine for 3 weeks, heroin for only 3 days, this policy potentially set up a new market for heroin in the prisons.
The Home Office won't admit that MDT is failing, but its figures show that while cannabis abuse is down, heroin usage isn't being cut.
And if you want it and you can afford it, you can go and get it. So the majority of people who are using inside the jail, as in Class A drugs, heroin, crack and things like that, well, the large majority of Class A drug in any jail system in this country is heroin. Heroin's the number one. It's where the money is. It's where the abuse is, really, you know.
Prisoners say they see inmates moving to heroin all the time.
Instead of taking the risk of smoking cannabis, they're smoking heroin because it comes out of your system a lot quicker.
Shelia M.Gore claims the trend is so severe that money will increasingly be needed not only to detect opiate takers, but also to help those who are addicted.
We should cease testing for cannabis in order to remove the potential healthcare own goal that random mandatory drugs testing policy presently is, that we can thereby save resources that can be redirected to fund drug rehabilitation in prisons.
If that rehabilitation isn't done on the inside, then the cost of the treatment for former inmates can be prohibitive on the outside. This private clinic detoxifies addicts, but at a cost, £500 a day for up to a week. Doctors here say it's money well spent.
Who is funding the habit anyway? Society is funding the habit. So to say that, you know, £2,000 for a detox program is expensive. What about £50,000 a year, which seems to be the average cost of heroin addiction? I'm seeing people with £100,000 a year plus cost per year. So you're talking somebody on £500,000 sterling over a period of 5 years. I mean, these are fantastic figures, and somebody is paying them. Society is paying them.
But for some, the lack of available and what they regard as ineffectual treatment has forced them to take extreme measures. This World War II fort was built to keep the enemy out. Now it'll be used to keep drug addicts in. It's 1.5 miles off the English coast. Philip Ball bought it after his son Stephen died from heroin addiction. The 21-year-old was coaxed back onto drugs even as he was receiving help. Mr. Ball says that will never happen at Bull Sands.
On this fault, you'll be away from all temptation. You'll be away from your dealers. In particular, this is brought about when my son was in a rehab. I phoned up to see how he was at the weekend, to told that he couldn't come to the phone. He was with his mother. I said, his mother standing beside me, and it was in fact his dealer who had gone down there to take drugs into the rehab and to sell them to all the other people.
Apart from marooning people in the middle of the ocean, there is another way of beating addiction. Naltroxane is a so-called narcotic antagonist. It neutralises the effects of opiates on the body and reduces the craving. Dr. Beani says it's much better than certain traditional treatments.
Methadone is as addictive as heroin. The person will use it all at once if given a week's supply. The person may sell it, may give it as a present to somebody else. And that's what I hear from my patients all the time, is that they take their couple of weeks prescription of methadone and they combine it themselves then with varying degrees of heroin and other opiates. And that's, if we carry on like this is not anymore harm reduction. This is beginning to verge really on the scandal.
But treatment inside or out is still reaction, not prevention. Back at Garth Prison, the governor is pleased with how well they're doing in reducing the amount of drugs smuggled to the inmates. He says cannabis has almost disappeared from his prison, but opiates are still to be found. Critics of mandatory random drug testing maintain that's because the whole idea is flawed.
Just as a medical intervention needs to have proof of safety and efficacy, so should a Home Office intervention, particularly if it potentially affects the health of prisoners.
Prison bosses in England and Wales don't agree with Dr. Gore's conclusions, but they are now refining their approach to inmate addiction. Less emphasis is being placed on cannabis and more on opiates. And at Garth there are plans to carry out random testing 7 days a week.